Okay. All right, recordings. Okay. So where are we? On modules.
I'm actually still left with last three sections of integration, configuring gateway, and manage client connections. So 3 hours videos left.
Okay. How about you, Clovis?
I finished all the modules, but I think I may have to go it over a second time in my own time, just to
Okay.
really get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to take a while for you guys to understand, but okay, once you do, it's going to be fairly easy.
Hmm.
So today in today's session, I'll go over gateway in my lab and show you a trace for ICA proxy, what it looks like. And I have a trace for a launch issue, so I can show you how you can narrow down that issue, what you can check, things like that. Okay. So ADC, as we talked last time, can be used for VPN, CVPN, as well as your ICA proxy. It all depends on the configuration, mainly your session policy. So let me share my screen. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is your VPN virtual server. Once you have, I usually tell, not to use Wizard. Instead, go here under Citrix Gateway Virtual Server, create a virtual server here, edit your session policies here, and get used to this rather than using your wizards. Because when you are in your customer's environment, they are not going to give you a wizard, or very rarely will they go here and show you, okay, this is my ADC configuration. This is the gateway virtual server I have 1 and 2. So it's good to see stats here, but go through your virtual server. You can configure your ICA proxy for the first time or your CVPN unified gateway for the first time through a wizard, no issues. But after you've configured it, go through your menu and check your virtual servers and different configurations through here rather than the wizard. Okay. So let's go through the basic settings first. When you open up your VPN virtual server, this is our basic settings. You give your name of the gateway, IP address, it's always on 443. And then here are your some more settings. So you'll see ICA only, this setting. So you can either set it to enabled or disabled. So what does this trigger? When this ICA only mode is on, it means you are using the basic mode where you can log into your gateway and get your apps and desktops from your CVAT. So you can get your virtual apps and desktop, and you can only use ICA proxy. You cannot use VPN, you cannot use CVPN. So when this is enabled, if I go to my licenses, under system licenses, you'll see currently my license type is platinum. So the platinum license gives me maximum Netscaler gateway users allowed and maximum ICA users allowed. So you'd see your usually maximum ICA users allowed is always unlimited with your even your standard license, right? But maximum Netscaler gateway users allowed given is like 5, 10, 550, depending on what kind of license you're using. It's not always unlimited. So enabling ICA only there on your virtual servers tells the ADC which license it's going to use. If it's ICA only is on over there on the virtual server, gateway virtual server, it checks for ICA users. And if the number of ICA users allowed is unlimited, it will never, drop any connection from a user based on the license. if you disable ICA only there, it will look into, ADC will look into the maximum Netscaler gateway users allowed. If per license of the customer, the Netscaler gateway users allowed are only 50, it will start giving error for 51st user, 52nd user, so on and so forth. So it will only allow 50 users, and it will uses per user license from here. So if a customer is only using ICA proxy, doesn't have a VPN, EPA, or CVPN configured, make sure you enable ICA only here, and it is marked as true. ICA only is supposed to be set off or disabled when you are using smart access. Smart access means where you are actually using your EPA to check your system and get the requirement of the system. For example, you want to check that all the users who are coming to the gateway should be using domain joined system. So you can configure EPA, that is your endpoint analysis, to check for domain of the customer. So a plugin is installed on your client machine. A plugin is pushed to the client machine from the ADC. It's installed and it checks for the domain. And if the requirement matches of whatever you have set up on the ADC, it will allow the user to log in. Otherwise, it won't allow your user to log in. So there are two types of check over there also. One is your pre-EPA and other is post-EPA. Pre-authentication EPA means before you authenticate, it will check your system, your device, for some particular requirements. Say it should be domain joined, it should have some virus, install your virus, antivirus, install your antivirus should be up to date, your operating system should be, say, Windows 10 and nothing below Windows 10, something like that. Whatever you configure as an expression, which I'll show you later on where you can configure it, accordingly, it'll allow your users to authenticate. Otherwise, it won't even allow your users to authenticate. The other could be the post-authentication, as the name suggests. First, you are allowed to authenticate to gateway, and then the check on your system is done. And this is where you can configure your EPA plugin upgrade if you would like to always push the upgrade. So as soon as you upgrade your ADC, it will check the EPA plugin version that's installed on your system, and it will upgrade it as well. So that's always essential or never, right? So if essential, if it's like a huge, you're still using EPA plugin that is 11.1, but you're on 13.1, that's a huge difference. There needs to be a EPA plugin, but not always. Never would be, we are never pushing the EPA plugin upgrade from the ADC. It does not check for your plugin version from the ADC end. So you can control your upgrade configuration from here, and you have to set ICA only to be disabled when you're using your EPA. You also have to set it off when you're using ADC as a VPN and CVPN, okay? Because your VPN, CVPN both takes your CCU license.
Aparna, EPA is only used when we are doing smart access. Otherwise, we cannot use it.
Smart access means using EPA. So it's not like if a customer wants to check something on the device, they want to check some registry key, they want to check something, use EPA. There's no bar when you can use it, when you cannot. It all depends on customer requirement. We have no say whatsoever.
Okay, so ICA doesn't support EPA, but everything else does support EPA, right?
No,
so.
ICA supports EPA. I'm not saying that ICA does not support EPA. You can have ICA proxy. That means you can access your apps and desktops, and you can have an EPA check on the front end. You can do that. It's just that you have to disable this option, because checking an EPA, using VPN and CVPN takes up your user license, Netscaler Gateway user license, which are not unlimited. They are unlimited only for platinum license. Otherwise, they are not unlimited.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
What about fallback on pre-authorization? I think I saw something about that. That if the like if you check the posture and something is wrong, it will fall you back to like maybe web only, and it doesn't let you get the full access.
That's uh, that depends on your configuration. As such, we don't have anything per design that if you have disabled and you have only 50, say, Netscaler Gateway user licenses, it will fall back to something. No, it won't. The 51st user will get an error. They will not be able to log in. That's it.
I mean, it
So
doesn't fall back to like a clientless VPN.
no, it does not. So that is a VPN with your IIP, where it falls back when you configure IIP intranet IPs to give to a user in a VPN. If you get if those IIPs go over, you don't have any more IIPs, it spillovers to your SNP that we
Okay.
have. We'll
Yeah.
discuss it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a lengthy session today, as I said. So we are going to discuss all those things one by one. But
Aparna, sorry, one more thing. When you configured IP to the virtual server, so was it a IP which you created from your SNP network?
this IP?
Yes.
This is just any IP. It doesn't have to be, in the same subnet as your SNP. No, because this is accessed by your front-end clients. So it is independent of your SNP.
Okay, it's independent of SNP and VIP also, no? Or you created a new IP. That's it,
Yeah,
right?
this is a new IP. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Then is enable authentication. If you want to authenticate the users on ADC itself, you enable it. So this is you'll see this maximum number of times. But sometimes due to misconfiguration, you'll see the customer has disabled it, and then you will see if you have configured ICA proxy, you'll see an authentication page coming from your storefront server and not from the ADC. So really nothing much about it here. Then another thing to look into here is your DTLS. So DTLS is it's secure communication over UDP rather than TCP. So when you enable DTLS with ICA proxy, it uses UDP protocol instead of TCP for communication. This falls back to TCP if DTLS fails. So this comes into picture only when we are launching an application. Your workspace does a DTLS, it sends a client hello on DTLS rather than SSL handshake. So it's going to be on UDP, and if the DTLS handshake is successful on the front end, we are going to have EDT communication on the back end. EDT is again our prior propriety, and you can it's an adaptive. I'm just muting myself for a minute. Give me a second. I'm getting a call.
Close. Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
So the fallback which you are talking about is whether for the non-domain clients.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if
Okay.
they are going to be a non-domain client, then instead of full VPN, it will be given with the ICA
Okay.
access only, I believe.
Yeah.
We'll confirm
I,
with Aparna anyhow.
yeah. I see. I see. I just know I saw something when I was watching the video about it.
Mm.
All right. Thank you for explaining.
Yeah, anyway, we'll get confirmed with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know less than you both since I've not studied the last three topics.
Yep, it will get covered.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah.
Aparna, just a
Mm-hmm.
confirmation before moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, Clovis was discussing about this fallback, right? So, is it like when we are using a non-domain client, we'll be configuring ICA proxy with fallback? So, is it correct?
No. Again, it depends on your configuration. There is no such default design that says if your EPA fails, you fall back to anything. It's all on your configuration. If your configuration is such that you've configured EPA on one policy and then you have second policy which is without any check, if the first one fails, it'll evaluate the second policy and let the users go in. So it's on configuration. As I said last time, it depends on the configuration. There is as such no fallback. It's just cascading of your policy expression.
Okay.
So I'll show that to you what I mean when I show you where and how you can configure EPA.
Sure.
All right. So I was talking about DTLS. Yes. When we use DTLS on the front end, your back end for ICA communication, we use EDT, which is a Citrix proprietary transport protocol, and it uses UDP instead of TCP. If in any case, if for your front end DTLS communication is going on, side by side, your TCP communication also starts. Just that, so that if DTLS communication on front end or EDT communication on the back end fails, we have TCP to fall back on, and TCP takes over. So you need not just know what adaptive transport is, need not go much in detail. You can just read about it, the basic introduction, and that it works on UDP instead of TCP. This EDT is mostly handled by your CVAT team because it's a backend communication. Okay. Then we have your app flow logging. We are logging into your ns.log and enable device certificate. If you are checking your device certificate as a part of EPA, you can just enable it and configure your CA here for the device certificate against which your CA of your device certificate will be checked. Right. Then comes your authenticate certificate, same as your simple SSL offloading. Basic authentication, you can configure your LDAP as primary, radius as secondary, but as I said, basic authentication is deprecated and not supported from 13.1 onwards. It's not that if somebody has configured basic authentication and it's on 13.1, it will suddenly stop working. It would work without any issues. But the code, when it was written for 13.1, was never written with basic authentication in mind. It was written with advanced authentication in mind. So there can be some crashes or some other issues, like session policy not working properly, something not working properly, and it can all be traced back to basic authentication being configured because it's not supported anymore. So try and tell your customers that and make them use advanced authentication instead of basic authentication. So advanced authentication profile, same as your authentication profile that you use on your load balancing or content switching, where you can bind your AAA virtual server and tell your gateway that we have to use AAA virtual server for authentication rather than this authentication, basic authentication. SSL parameters, SSL ciphers, profile, and other profiles. Okay, then we have your portal themes. Portal theme is nothing but how you would like your login page to show up. That's your portal theme. You can look into the help legend and see what is what. So this is a page of your usually CVPN when you configure. This is how the page looks like. So you have your Windows apps, you have your web apps, your SaaS apps. So all your apps show up like this. And you can play around with the theme, the colors, the look and the feel of this page using the portal theme. Okay, we have default portal theme that is, black in color, your green bubble, green X1 and RFA UI. You can use any of these themes and use them as a template to create new themes of your own and give them your own, add your own logos, your company logos, pictures, backgrounds, etc. You can play around with it when you have some time. We have your other settings, your ICMP virtual server response, how it responds to your ICMP, what is its RHI state. But main thing is your listening policy. This listen policy was also there on your load balancing, content switching, etc. Listen, so you cannot configure, and if you try and configure to load balancing virtual server to any virtual server with same IP and on same port, it will give you an error. But if you configure a listening policy, say I tell it that all the let's use expression editor, all the client IPs, destination, or let's say source from in subnet, and I define a particular subnet here. So all the client IPs, all the requests I get to this gateway virtual server where the source IP is in this subnet, only then this gateway virtual server should be used, right? Otherwise, use the other gateway virtual server, and then the other gateway virtual server that I'll have will be created on same IP and same port. So only using a listen policy can you create two gateway, not gateway, but any virtual servers with same IP, same port. So this is what your listen policy is for. And then comes your policy section where you bind your session policy, which does the actual work of giving your user VPN, CVPN, or ICA proxy, and other policies as well, like your traffic policy, audit, pre-authentication, clientless, cache, responder, rewrite, app flow, ICA, URL, etc. Okay. So first of all, let's look into EPA before we start with anything. So here, under your policy, we had an option pre-authentication. So you configure your pre-auth policy, and you can use your expression. Like in this expression, I'm checking if an antivirus exists on client. So any application, any antivirus. I'm not defining which antivirus, but if an antivirus exists, then carry on with this action. This is your pre-authentication action. And in this pre-authentication action, I'm just allowing. That means if a user has an antivirus in their system, we'll allow them to log in. Right. If they do not have antivirus in their system, then you can add a default, you can add a default group. So if let's say I'm putting I put an EPA group, allowed group. So all the users that are that have antivirus and passed this pre-authentication check will be put under allowed group EPA. You can further configure this allowed group under your AAA. You can configure this allowed group here under AAA and accordingly give them some policy. So say session policy that I'm going to give them is say this one, okay, which is leading them to say store 1. Or maybe I'm giving them specific internet application access that I might not give to other AAA users, which do not pass. So as I said, there is actually no design by default that there is any fallback, but the requirement of customer is such that if there is an antivirus, I should be able to give them ABC application. That ABC application should not be given to the users who don't have antivirus. So then I create another pre-auth, policy. Give them some other check, whatever check that might be. Create another pre-authentication profile here and give them, say, allowed group 2. Okay, so I created another group here.
So is it case sensitive that we must configure same as in AAA?
No. So say I'm checking operating system should be operator. I don't know any build of operating system. Do you know any build of operating system of Windows 10? One 9042. Okay. So in this, I'm going to check if the client operating system is Windows 10 and it is equal to 19042. Only then I'm going to allow that user to go through and things like that. Yeah. So it actually depends on your customer and their requirement. Then if this pre-auth policy fails, it will go to and evaluate the next pre-auth policy and the third, fourth, fifth until it finds a match. If there is nothing else left, it will just give an error that your system is not up to the requirement. Usually when customer is doing such checks for pre-auth, antivirus or things, they either want the users to be allowed in or not allow in. That's it. There is no fallback needed. But there is one way that you can configure a fallback if you have to. Another way, this is your pre-authentication. So post-authentication, if a check on the client system has to be done after your users have logged in, it can be done editing the session profile. Go to security, advanced, and override global. Click on override global and you can configure your expression here. You can again check for some antivirus if it exists or if it doesn't exist. Okay, you can use your Oxford EP editor. So Windows generic product scan I'm doing for application antivirus. If a user fails this check of antivirus, you can put them in a group. So security group can be assigned to all the users that fail this check. In this case, it's known as quarantine group. So I've already created a quarantine group. So all the users who pass this check will get their applications, will get their configuration as per the configuration set on the session profile. All the users who fail this check will get configuration of whatever you configure in quarantine group. So this is a post authentication. Once you have authenticated, then this check is done. Okay. And then you can give your users. So this is how you configure your pre-auth and post-auth. Now coming to the session policies, which I said is the main thing, and that's how you give your users VPN, CVPN, or ICA proxy. So let's go through session profile tabs one by one. First is your network configuration. This is needed or configured when you have your VPN. Client experience, security, published app, remote desktop, and PCO-IP. Now, say if I want to have my VPN, I'm just configuring this virtual server, gateway virtual server, to give a VPN and establish a VPN with the gateway. What I do is I configure clientless access needs to be off, and my ICA proxy needs to be off. With my ICA proxy off and clientless access off, the session profile will be configured as your VPN. And then further, I can give a home page, and we can display a home page here. Say I want to, as soon as a customer connects to VPN, I want to send them to citrix.com page. I can just configure that here. And as soon as they connect to VPN, by default, their browser opens citrix.com. Then I have my split tunnel. What split tunnel does is I can configure under intranet application, I can configure some IPs, the destination IPs or IPs to the web servers, my website. So all the requests to those IPs, to that subnet, which I've configured under intranet application, will go through my VPN. All the other traffic, which is not configured under intranet application, will not go through VPN and will go outside the VPN. So say I've configured split tunnel on, and I've configured intranet application and defined subnet that is my internal subnet to my Citrix. Okay. So as soon as you connect to VPN and you're connected to VPN and you access this 10.110.202.252, which is configured in intranet application in that subnet, the traffic for this particular IP would go through my VPN. And if I, access my Gmail, if I want to access my Gmail, it won't go through VPN. It will go directly to your internet. So that's what split tunnel does with on. If it's off, all your traffic goes through your VPN. You can access whatever you want. Everything goes through VPN. Reverse split tunnel, all your traffic to the application or IPs that's defined under your intranet application would go outside VPN, and everything else goes inside VPN. So now this time with split tunnel, say I have given subnet A and subnet B. So on my internet application, I've configured subnet A and subnet B. So if I'm accessing any resource, any server on subnet A, it will go outside my VPN. If I access any server on subnet B, it will go outside my VPN. But if I access anything else apart from these two subnets, everything will go through VPN. So that's why you configure split tunnel. Then you have your session timeout. It's the number of minutes after which your session will time out. Client idle timeout, after which the session times out if there is no activity, mouse or your keyboard activity from your client. Then comes your client access off. So right now we are just looking into VPN related configuration. So this will be off. Nothing else here will come into picture because it's all related to client access. Then your plugin type. Plugin type is because you're going to have to install a plugin on your system, right? So if it's Windows or Mac OS, Mac operating system, usually it's Mac operating system Windows, that's what you select. Then again, the same concept as we had with EPA. Do we want, because for VPN, again, you are going to use your Windows VPN plugin, your gateway plugin for Windows machine. And for your Mac, you're going to use SSO app, Citrix SSO app, to establish VPN with the gateway. If they need to get upgraded or not, that configuration is controlled from here. Your always on profile. Always on profile does what is, say you have your VPN and you want, as soon as your user boots up their system, a VPN should establish depending on whether they are on your network or outside the network. So that's what always on handles. If as soon as I switch on my laptop and I have always on configured on my VPN, so the first time I access my VPN after configuring always on has to be manually, because first time your always on configuration needs to be pushed from your ADC to my system and make the necessary registry changes and changes on my system. But after that, anytime I switch on my laptop, it will check whether my system is on internet or intranet. And depending on that, it will establish the VPN. So if I log on and open my system and I am connected, I'm within Citrix offices, and I connect to my Citrix office Wi-Fi, it will check that I'm internal to the network and VPN need not be established. It won't do anything. But as soon as I come out and maybe I go to Starbucks, open up my laptop and connect to their public Wi-Fi, it sees that I'm on internet now, and automatically it will establish a VPN with the gateway. This automatic, a VPN establishment is only if your authentication is configured in such a way that no user interference is needed. If you have configured Okta, and it's going to send a push to your phone where a user interference is needed, where you need to click on yes, it's me, then it will give you that authentication prompt and it won't be seamless. Okay, but you get the general idea what always on is for. So you need to add your profile and configure, so it's a location-based VPN. So when location-based VPN is remote, client tries to detect if it is located within your network or not, and then accordingly establishes your VPN. If it is configured, you have another option. If it's configured as everywhere, then it does not check if whether the user is on internet or intranet. It just establishes the tunnel. It just establishes your VPN. Then we have your client control. So are we allowing the user to log off and connect to another gateway or not? Depends on here. So if you use our Citrix VPN, the client control is denied there. You cannot log off manually from your VPN. As soon as you shut down your system, and not even if you put it on sleep, you do not terminate your VPN connection. But as soon as you shut down your system, that's when the tunnel breaks. Then is your network access on VPN failure. So only to gateway or full access. So it's an option to block your network traffic when tunnel is not established. So when you set your system to own, you set this configuration to only to gateway, then the network, the traffic to and from the client, except for which is to the gateway IP, to this gateway virtual server, it's blocked. Otherwise, in full access, no network traffic is blocked. Everything is allowed. Okay. So that's all about your always on profile. Then single sign-on to web application is if you want, there is a application that you're going to access through VPN, through CVPN, ICA proxy, whatever, which is going to need a single sign-on. And there is going to be like NTLM authentication. You check this option and enable this so that ADC knows that whenever you get a 401 from the backend application, which needs to get credentials, it needs to interfere on behalf of user and send the credentials that's been given during the authentication to the ADC. So what authentication index you use, credential index you use to send primary or secondary, you choose here. And this primary and secondary actually comes from this basic authentication. So when you configure basic authentication, say if I just have LDAP, I'm not using any other authentication, the type will be by default primary, and I'm just going to have my primary authentication. But if I'm doing a dual auth or sometimes MFA, where I'm using primary, I need first username, password, and a passcode that's going to come from, say, Radius. Then the second authentication that I'm going to use needs to come from the type needs to be secondary, and then choose your policy. So this is my Radius policy and this. So out of these two authentication, now there are two types of authentication here, right? LDAP and Radius. Out of these two, which credentials provided for which authentication am I going to use for single sign-on? That's what we are configuring under credential index here. So with basic policy, this used to make sense that have primary or secondary. But now when we are configuring AAA authentication, there is no primary authentication, there is no secondary authentication. So it being primary works. Okay. If there is a need from the customer end that they need to do a KCD, Kerberos authentication on the back end, you can configure your KCD account here. Then if you need to do a single sign-on with Windows, that means you need to auto log on into session and use your credentials that were given to the Windows during when you booted up your laptop. You can enable it here. Client cleanup prompt, as soon as you disable or you log off from your VPN, you can clear out all your cookies, client-side cache, etc. This will be used. So you can turn it off if you don't want to clean up all the cache and cookies. If you want to, you can keep it on. And as soon as you log out, you will get a prompt that a cleanup is going to start and what all it's going to clean up. If there is a checkbox given at that time, you can unselect if there is anything you don't want it to clean up from the session. Then you have your general client cleanup and proxy. So client cleanup prompt we are giving, but to what extent do you want to clean your system up can be configured here. If you want to configure a proxy for your VPN, it can be configured here. And if you want to give a login or logout script, you can configure it here. This all depends on customer requirement. You will not be asked to write any script. A script and the path where the script is will be provided to you. You just need to mention it here, the script name. That's it. Split DNS. So when you are on your VPN and you want to resolve your FQDN, where do you get that FQDN resolved? One is your DNS that you've configured on your system, your machine itself, from where you're connecting to the gateway. The other is your DNS that you've configured on the ADC itself, because now you're connected to VPN, so you can send all your DNS requests to ADC itself to resolve it. So split DNS handles that. If you configure both, it will send a request to your local DNS, the DNS that you've configured on your machine, as well as the DNS that's configured on the ADC. Whichever responds fast it will take that response. We have your second option is local. It uses the local DNS that you've configured on your system, and remote, which is the DNS configured on your ADC. So if a customer comes to you saying they are not able to access any FQDN, and you see that there is any DNS probe failed or unable to resolve the FQDN, things like that, look into the split DNS configuration. If it's both, run a quick trace on the client machine when FQDN is being resolved and see if none of them is giving any response. Change it to local and see if the local DNS is able to resolve it or a remote DNS is able to resolve it faster.
Would that be the local DNS? Would that be on the local host file?
Not the host file, but the local DNS that you configure on your system.
Okay, and not the local host. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Then your allow users to change log levels. This is something related to the troubleshooting. When you look into your VPN, I should have a VPN. Okay, this is my plugin for my Windows. Okay, so allow users to change log levels. If you go to logging, this is where you collect all your logs from to troubleshoot, and configuration. This is where you enable logging. So because this must be unchecked on the VPN wherever Citrix has configured this VPN to which I'm connected currently, I'm not able to enable debug logging. Otherwise, by default, it's checked, and you should be able to select this checkbox and debug logging and look into the logs. So whenever you are troubleshooting VPN issues, always before replicating the issue and collecting logs, check this box. If this is grayed out, make sure this is checked under session profile and then check this box. And after that, collect logs from here. Same, the look and the feel is the same for Citrix SSO as well on your Mac. So it's not much different, and it works same in the same manner. Okay, then you have your local LAN access. So if split tunnel is off and you want to access your local LAN network, just enable this and set this to enabled on your plugin as well. Okay, allow access to private network IP addresses only. You can check this. Client choices. This comes into picture when you have VPN, CVPN, as well as ICA proxy, all three of them. There you can give all three options to your users. And what would happen is 3-pane window would, as soon as you authenticate, there will be a 3-pane window. One giving you an option to connect to a VPN, second giving you an option to connect to CVPN, and third giving you an option to connect to ICA proxy. And you can click on whatever the user want and get connected accordingly. So this is how you give that choice. This is enabled by default, and a misconfiguration from customer side, they'll come to you that I'm not able to see my icons, I'm not able to see this and that, and maybe they just don't want client choices. So disable it at that point. Okay. Show VPN plugin icon with receiver. This option does what is like right now. When I access my gateway plugin, I accessed it through Citrix receiver in advanced preference, and I can see Netscape gateway settings here. So if you want to show VPN plugin icon with receiver, like here, you enable this option. Okay. Now, talking about VPN, continuing to talk about VPN, the network configuration, I talked about DNS virtual server. So DNS that you configured on remote, that is your DNS configured on ADC. If you want to configure your a DNS virtual server, and maybe there are 3-4 DNS virtual server configured, and you want to use just one of them, you can, as soon as you configure your DNS virtual server under load balancer, you'll be able to see it here, and you can select one of those DNS virtual servers here. Then comes your WNS server IP address to add Citrix Gateway for name resolution. You can give that IP here. Kill connection, on or off. So if you want to disconnect all your pre-existing connections, before the user is logged on, and at any, so say there is new connection coming to the gateway at any time you feel like you need to connect or disconnect all your users that were maybe over a weekend. A customer's requirement is, let's disconnect all the users that are connected right now, and you want them to log in back again. If they want to continue accessing the resources, you enable this option, kill connection. All your connection will be killed. You need not configure it manually. You need not go ahead and disconnect users manually. Then is your use mapped IP, that is to use your any different SNP or not. So don't look into it. Nobody will ever use it. Nobody is ever going to make changes to it. By default, we always use SNP to the backend. Now, this is what I was talking about. You can say the requirement is you have 50 users. All 50 users are connecting to your VPN through this gateway, and they're accessing resources on the backend. How do you on the backend distinguish user A from user B? Because by default design of gateway is such that client comes to gateway, and when ADC talks to the backend servers, it uses SNP to talk to the backend. How do you differentiate one user from the other for your VPN access? You can define intranet IPs. So we have intranet IP. You can define your IPv4 or IPv6. Give intranet IP and the net mask. So as your user logs in, the user is given an IP from this pool that you define here. So you've only given a pool of 50 IPs, but you have 5,500 users coming in. What happens when all 50 users are logged in and using all the 50 IPs that you've configured in intranet IP, and a 51st user wants to log in? So if you have no spillover configured, it's not going to give a SNP it's not going to use the SNP to access the backend. And instead, a page will come to the user if they want to transfer a login. So transferring a session means it's going to take IP from the user who's been logged in for longest. So out of 50 users, say one user was logged in for 20 hours, all the others were logged into 10 or less hours. So that user who has been logged in for 20 hours, his connection will be disconnected, and the IP that was assigned to that user will be given to the new user. So that's what happens on no spillover, which is not something that you want to do. Maybe that user was using, the VPN and his work wasn't done. So you configure spillover at that time. What will spillover do is it will start using SNP for all the users from after 50 users, all the users. Nobody gets their own intranet IP. Instead, ADC will use your SNP to communicate to the backend. And Office, we have not configured anything. There is no configuration related to your address pool. Yeah.
So on that spillover, what if it's running a public safety app and it can't be disconnected? There's no priority queue on it that says this user has priority and cannot be disconnected?
No. That's why if you have such user and you don't want to, most people don't want to configure spillover. So the after 50 users, they start using SNP and nobody gets disconnected. Okay. Now,
So,
whenever you use a, yeah, go ahead.
but client will reach the ADC through public IP then?
Yes. The communication is always public IP to ADC. Though, like even right now, if I see my plugin and I look into my home, I'm given an IP. So this is my internal network address. This is an IIP that's actually given to me, 10.150.32.97. This doesn't mean that I'm accessing gateway through this IP. My public IP is still used to access the gateway. But when I access this ADC or any other internal resource to Citrix, this IP is used to access my ADC and other resources. 10.150.32.97.
The backend applications which we give
Backend.
access.
Yes.
Like on the Cisco AnyConnect software, I have choices. Like if I try to go through one IP and that maybe the IP is busy, I can't. I don't have any option where I could go to another pool.
Yes, you can configure more than one pool, definitely. It's not just that you can configure one pool. Once you've configured one pool, say, okay, so this pool is there. You can configure another pool. So once whatever is configured first, right? This is the highest priority. Once the IPs from this pool gets over, you'll start using the IP from the other pool. You can do that. I want you guys to go through there's a good FAQ about intranet IPs and how they work. So go through this. Okay, just go through this particular documentation. Okay. Just know where you need to have IIP configured for sure, things like that. Okay, where were we? So that's all about your VPN, and that's how you configure your VPN. And you push your VPN configuration. Let's see if I have any. I don't have any trace. Ashwin, do you have any case of VPN?
No, Aparna. That's too early. It's like I'm back to day one again.
Did you get any cases this week?
Yeah, she gave me one case, and that's a licensing issue for ICA proxy.
Okay.
But not like any other cases. And one case was moved to ADM team.
Oh, ADM. You escalated one case that analysis had given you.
Yes, that she told it's a bug.
She told me. Because in that logs, there were no issue with the memory or anything when the issue was occurring, but in the new logs, she saw issues with memory. I don't have any trace to show you guys right now, but I have
Or else we'll be having like any logs generated from the client end so that we can collect it and we'll be able to see.
VPN logs I can show you. That I have, and I can show that to you. How to check for VPN log. I had kept one log for you guys for VPN. So when you collect logs from your VPN plugin, right, such a tar zipped file, you'll get VPN logs with the date when it was collected and the version of your plugin. So if you want to check installation related logs when your VPN was installed, check NSI/NST. Launch related issues you can check here. VPN connection related things you check here in NSSL VPN. So this is how the log looks like. This is my time. This is the version and when it was collected. This is the exe files that runs on your system to collect the logs. Now, you'll see as soon as, so these logs, this VPN logs, we don't have like historical logs. They're all real-time logs. So whatever last VPN connection you had to your system, logs from that time will be collected here. So I can show that to you, the real time from here as well. So if I go to logging and I open log file, okay. So first of all, you will see first and foremost thing that the plugin does is to check if there is always on enabled or not. So always on service mode is on. So it is enabled. We will use this as virtual server URL. This is the virtual server URL that is pre-configured to the VPN. This is what it's going to use. In always on service mode, always on is force enabled and client control is force disabled. So client control that we saw in the session policy here. Where did we see that? This is not allowed. And your where did the client control go? Yeah, this is not allowed. Okay. Now VPN plugin will skip location detection check and rely on AO service location detection. So location detection is enabled on your, there you go, always on. Okay. So client control is not allowed and your location detection is enabled. So it's going to use your enable detection and it's going to check if I'm on internal network or external internet and accordingly. So service location detection value is internet. So I'm on internet and it'll start a VPN. It'll establish a VPN connection to my tunnel will be established. So didn't perform the step as tunnel is in use by service mode on VPN. So you can see everything that it's trying to do. And right now I have not even enabled debugging. If you've enabled debugging on your plugin, a lot more detail, you'll see logs in a lot more detail. Okay. So internet interface IP address has been changed and or resumed from standby. So now it will start the authentication process. Once it's checked for my always on, you'll see phase, login phase. It will start. From 12.0 version onwards, plugin does support captive portal. So it will check for captive portal. If it doesn't find any captive portal, it will continue with the authentication process. So VPN plugin will connect to cached IP. This is the IP that this autopilot.ag.citrus.com resolves to, and it's going to start communicating with this. It sends a get plugin customization response. Okay, we're not going to customize anything in the plugin. Then a head CGI authenticate. It checks for VPN plugin list.xml. It checks in this request, it checks for your plugin version and if that needs to be upgraded to the latest or to match the version of my gateway or not. Okay, and then it'll start the authentication process. It'll post your home configuration, NF. So whenever you see /NF, that means you have AAA virtual server configured for authentication purposes. So we start with the authentication process. We are asking for the authentication methods that we have, get authentication request.do, and before the authentication process starts, it's going to check for pre-authentication EPA. So it's initiating an EPA scan. Whenever you see any EPA scan initiating in your Wireshark trace, also you'll see the get EPA type request being sent. So device cert check absent and EPA is present. So the device cert check that we have on your basic settings under your gateway, that's not checked. It's absent, but EPA is present. So it's going to check. So as soon as an EPA check is initiated, you will see a request EPA queue. And it checks for your EPA. Now, the EPA check here is to check for your certificates. Netscaler has sent list of allowed CA or device certificates. This is the list that the backend has sent, and multiple valid certificate found, asking user to select a certificate. So now, in this case, a user intervention is needed. Otherwise, if we did not have multiple valid certificate and we just had one valid certificate, it would have checked and taken that certificate by default. But because I have multiple valid certificate bound to this particular system, it will give me a prompt. It will ask me to choose out of 2 certificates that I have to choose 1 certificate. Now, found certificate based on user's saved preference. Whatever I selected. So post EPAS as soon as I'm sending a response to the EPA check that was there. So you'll see EPA whenever it's initiating an EPA check on the ADC end, we send a post request for that. Okay, EPA was successful. EPA is done. Then comes my authentication. So there is SAML authentication there. It will do open SAML window with HTML. So SAML is only supported with your N factor. As in, it might not work if you configure SAML as your basic authentication on the gateway, because our plugin is not advanced enough to handle your rewrite or redirect to your IDP. So we use WebView form for that. So we have SAML configured here. We have Okta configured, right, for Citrix authentication. So that's what it does. And you can see all the.
ADC will only act as a service provider?
Yes.
So it will not, on any situation, it can't be a IDP?
It can be. It depends on the customer configuration. So here it's SP.
Oh, okay. For when it comes to gateway, it will be SP.
Yeah, because the gateway is providing the service of VPN, right? So it can be that the customer has configured they have two gateway. One gateway is acting as an IDP, the other gateway is acting as an SP. That can happen. But when I'm connected to my VPN, this VPN is definitely an SP. And if I have SAML, something else is going to be an IDP, whatever that something else is.
Okay. So how I
Okay.
thought is like ADC will be like IDP and SaaS application will be like ASP.
Oh, no. We'll talk about SAML today.
Okay.
We'll do that today. Okay. So I'm authenticating through my IDP, and nothing really happens here while I'm authenticating through my IDP. Okay. EPA check is done. SAML, what's happening here? And CJ authenticate. What happened here? Let me come to 11. 9, 15 is when I connected. 21, 15. Okay. All right. So, okay, SAML authentication is done. Open SAML window. This is the window that opened for my authentication. As soon as I've posted that SAML authentication, 302 was sent to that CGI SAML. My authentication is done. Once the authentication is done, you will see VPN pre-configuration. So now the pre-configuration starts. CGI set client under question agent request when as soon as I'm done authentication and authentication is successfully done, VPN pre-config starts. We send a GET request CGI/set client. This means it needs to hit session policy, and we need to get configuration from your session policy. So session policy gets hit. Again, it's checking for the plugin list, and it checks for other. Now, my session policy is hit. All the configuration that I've done on my session policy, all that is checked. So whether I have configured that LAN connection needs to be there, or any other configuration needs to be there, all that is checked. So first request, but I still haven't pushed the network configuration from my ADC to my client, this particular system, right? So first request I send is a /CS request on my UDP protocol, and I get a 200 OK. That's fine. After post authentication, the gateway is configured. Now my VPN will configure. I send a get/CFG request. This is a request to get configuration from the ADC, because how will my system will know if I have split tunnel configured, which traffic needs to be sent through VPN, which traffic needs to be sent on internet, what is my DNS configuration, things like that. How would this particular system know? We send a GET request for CFG, and a response 200 OK will have all this information, whether IIP that I'm going to get, what routes need to be added to send certain traffic through VPN and other traffic to internet, what DNS configuration needs to be done. This is sent in 200 OK. So as soon as the 200 OK is sent, your post VPN configuration start. That means we start configuring your Citrix virtual adapter, which adds your different routes. As soon as you see things like fail, it's okay. It doesn't mean that your Citrix virtual server is not able to add routes to your system. No. So you can go and check for routing table and check the routes created there for yourself. So as soon as that is done, you will see requests being sent to DNS, all your UDP packet processing and things like that. And as soon as your this routes and everything get added, your VPN is established. And after that, you will see just the communication that UDP port was deleted when it'll tear down a connection, or a UDP communication established, a TCP communication established, a port deleted when it's tearing down connection, things like that, right? So if your VPN at any time you have an issue that customer says, I'm able to log in, but after that, nothing is happening. I'm not able to communicate with anything. Like I'm not getting any response. Check after authentication, check for VPN pre-config and VPN post-config. Check if a SAS CFG request was sent, a 200 OK we got. And after that, is there an issue over here? So you can check these logs. Take a trace also while you are checking VPN logs, because it might be that routes and everything are properly added, but there is like client is sending a successful communication to ADC. It's sending that data, but the ADC using that internet IP is not able to communicate to the backend. Could be a simple network issue as well. So you need to take a trace. Only VPN logs will not suffice in that case. Okay. If there's an issue with the EPA, we have EPA logs as well. This customer did not have EPA configured. So we have EPA logs as well, and you check those EPA logs. See. Right, yes. On your desktop directory. See, these are my EPA logs. Okay, so if there is an issue with the EPA, check NS EPA logs. You will get the error here if this EPA check failed at any time. You will see it here. So like here, server certificate in chain context is invalid. Certificate is different virtual server. And that's why this EPA check failed here on when 28th September. Got long time back. But last time the EPA failed was here. And this was the reason why it failed. You'll see the reason why it failed in ns.log as well in your ADC logs under var log. So that's where you can check for EPA why it failed as well. Okay, so this is all about your VPN. I hope you got a better idea how VPN works. And even if like you don't understand it fully right now, it's okay. Once you configure it for yourself and see it working in customer's environment, that's when you'll see it. Okay. Now coming to your CVPN. CVPN is easy. It's nothing. All we configure is clientless access on. You can have your ICA proxy off or ICA proxy on, depending on whether your application that you're giving through CVPN and you're defining in ADC, you need to give your application that are published on your VDA or not along with it. If you want to give ICA applications and desktop along with the application that you're going to configure on the ADC, you can have it enabled. Otherwise, you can have it disabled. So all you need to have client access on. So client access URL encoding. When you access CVPN, you will see the URL that you get here is not clear. I think I had sent an email to Arav. This case, I can show you how CVPN looks like. Okay. So this is how your CVPN would look like. So HTTPS and then the URL of your gateway slash CVPN slash the URL that you are accessing on your backend. This is how it would look like. So what customer is accessing here is storefront to get your apps or desktop. So if you configure client access URL clear, this is what you see. You'll see the whole URL, the URL that we are trying to access on the backend. It's a CVPN and the gateway. If it is configured as obscure, you don't or in obscure, a standard encoding mechanism is used, and you will not see anything after FQDN, the gateway FQDN. You won't see CVPN. This all will be encrypted. And if you use encrypt, it allows your, the domain and the protocol will be used to encrypt using a session key. So obscure uses your standard encoding system. Encrypt will use your domain and protocol. It allows your domain and protocol to use your session key to decrypt your this FQDN. So in obscure as well as encrypt both, you won't be able to read this URL. So whenever troubleshooting CVPN, always first go and clear your access URL encoding and then troubleshoot, because at least wherever the issue is going wrong, whichever request it is, you'll be able to clearly see here which request is causing an issue, and then further, check it in trace and troubleshoot. So client access, persistent cookie deny, advanced. So we have advanced clientless VPN mode. If you disable this, and also go through this VPN Citrix. Okay. So initially we only had CVPN, and with CVPN we had very limited sites through which could be published to your users. You could access your OVA, Outlook OVA, your SharePoint share file. These were the things that were allowed, and we tested, because when CVPN, when we are giving that option to publish that application, what we are actually doing is, under your published application, we give a URL, right? We create a bookmark. So if I'm giving a URL to my site abc.xyz.com, and what text I want to display, beneath that icon, this is a name for the bookmark for my own. So instead of this, I can just also give like ABC bookmark. This is the URL that will be accessed. And I can give a particular icon also if I want. I can install that icon to the ADC and use that icon. Then configure if there is an application type, a SSO type, whatever. Okay, so I can configure, I can configure all these things. So with CVPN, what all sites I can give as a bookmark was very limited. With advanced CVPN, we use relative URLs, and the scope for the sites that I can publish as internet application on the ADC, it's changed a lot. There is certain difference between advanced clientless and clientless. Clientless, as I said, can only use OVA, SharePoint, ShareFile, certain things. With your advanced CVPN, you can use much more. The URL encoding is also different for advanced clientless CVPN and your clientless VPN. So what CVPN does is, The prerequisite is wildcard server certificate. For that particular domain, we need a wildcard certificate, because what we do is, for example, if the application, the web application hosted is https webapp.customer.com, and the VPN virtual server is vpn.customer.com. So this is your gateway URL, and the application that you've hosted on your backend is webapp.customer.com. This is what you're going to configure under your intranet application URL, right? So the CVPN in advanced clientless CVPN will rewrite the URL as something encrypted, CVPN something encrypted .vpn.customer.com. So every URL will be rewritten as a subdomain of your VPN virtual server. So it's not only in the header. That means it's not only here in your request URL or in your request header that here, or in your HTTP request URL where it gets rewritten. In the response, this doesn't have any kind of payload or response, but if it had any response, it had any HTTP body, it would have been rewritten in the whole HTTP body. Okay, so first of all, because if your certificate is going to be for either vpn.customer.com, or even if it's going to have SAN name for vpn.customer.com, webapp.customer.com, maybe abc.customer.com and things like that, it does not include. And because this is the subdomain, the URL that we rewrite is going to be encrypted format. So it can be actually anything. You cannot predict it. So we need a wildcard certificate. That's why. So it's a prerequisite to have a wildcard certificate. So this is then how your URL would look like, with obscure and encrypted. So you need to, because usually when you get CVPN cases, how you'll get CVPN cases is you're able to log in, you get that bookmark, you click on the application, another tab opens up, and that particular application will open up in another tab, but you are not getting, like, some images are not getting populated. You are not seeing some images, or maybe some particular page is blank, or some particular part of page is blank. So at that time, go to your developer tools, run this developer tool. It's there on each and every browser. So create and collect the har file. So whenever you access, like whatever you access, you see here, like for each and every request, I'm getting 200, okay, 200, okay, 200, okay. So for any request that I get 401 or a 404, that's the one that's causing an issue. And I can look into that request URL that's causing an issue. But if it's encrypted or obscure, the URL will be in this format. You cannot tell what the request is, what the request was. So that's why before troubleshooting, make sure your URL configured over there is clear, so you can actually see the exact request URL that was sent. And then also take a trace on your ADC. So you can also, then go back to your trace and check on the trace where you see this particular HTTP request coming to the ADC, and then check what was sent to the backend and what response did the backend give. If backend gives a proper response, maybe we were not able to rewrite a particular request properly. So in this response, so see, this particular request has a response. So in this response, maybe we were not able to, there was a JavaScript, request or something that we were not able to rewrite properly, which was causing issue. Then we can look into it why we are not rewriting. Maybe try configuring rewrite policy and rewrite that HTTP body for the user manually and then check. So that's how the basic troubleshooting for CVPN be like. Okay. So this is all about your CVPN.
So can we give the storefront URL as well
Yep.
as a bookmark?
And no, not as a bookmark. So you need not give it as a bookmark, right? Because as I said, if you want to configure your CVPN with ICA proxy, just enable ICA proxy and in CVPN, enable CVPN.
Okay.
That's it. When you give your web interface address here, this is where you give your storefront URL. So when you give your URL here, it will fetch the apps and desktops from this URL. You need not give it as a bookmark.
Even bookmark also will work, right? Or
No,
because
it
what
won't work.
happened is
Working for storefront is totally different. Storefront
oh,
won't work as bookmark.
okay.
What happened? Did you try
No,
and
when
configure it?
I tried doing as a lab, but I was getting like you're not you need to log out. Then I tried on like a lot of URLs
Yeah.
that they're telling to go and restart that process or on the from the storefront server.
If you want to configure storefront, means you need to get apps and desktop from storefront along with the apps that you are providing in intranet application for CVPN. You configure ICA proxy on and configure storefront because there is a particular design how storefront works, and that's how storefront works. Full stop. There is no other way to make it work. So
Okay.
a bookmark won't work. Give a bookmark for citrix.com/download. You'll you'll be redirected to that page as a bookmark. Give whatever other site you want to give as a bookmark, you'll get it, but not storefront.
Okay. Because when I log into storefront, right, it always says your logon has expired. Please log in again after to continue.
That's an issue. If that's going directly to storefront or going through gateway,
Going through gateway.
that's an issue. That's a configuration issue.
Okay, because till yesterday it was working fine. Today I restarted my ADC and after that I got.
That's a configuration issue. Look into the remote access configuration and make sure your storefront is configured properly for your gateway.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
the issue there. Okay, that was your CVPN. Now comes your gateway. So gateway is big. Okay, and it's easy. It's really easy. Especially it's easy because you have all the components that are involved in gateway at your disposal in your lab to configure each and everything and see how they work. So at first it might look a bit difficult, but there are lots and lots. When I say it's big, I mean lots of components are involved. But once you get hang of it, it's extremely easy, and you'll be able to pinpoint what's the issue by looking at a trace like that. And once you get used to it, you'll see the error and you'll know what the issue is. So let's look into it first. Have you guys gone through the CVAD module, and did you understand how CVAD works without the ADC? Let's start from there.
Yes, we have been through the CVAT.
Mm-hmm.
I have a basic idea, but since we've not configured it, so it's not that clear until the configuration.
I don't know if they have a working diagram of things. We have working connection, working things from our side.
Basically, what I understood the most is that eventually the storefront contacts delivery controller, and delivery controllers gives the ticket or checks the server for. Basically, delivery controller does everything for behind.
Yes. That's the gist of it. So you need to know at least, like, if a customer brings up delivery controller word while you're working with them, you don't blank out completely like what was delivery controller. You should have a bit idea of, okay, I know delivery controller does this. At any point of time you see any issue from storefront, delivery controller, any end, it's you can involve free field to involve these CVAD people at that point. So you need not worry about it.
Aparna, I have a question. Like, how would we know that it's not a gateway issue and a CVAD issue? Like, because the
That's what
authentication process.
that's what I'm going to teach you today.
Okay,
That's
great.
what this session is about, how to tell it's our issue or not. So for that also you need to have a basic idea, because what would happen is, I told you last time also, more often than not when you involve CVAS of a team, they'll say it's working internally, it's not working externally, it's your issue, it's not our issue. When you bypass ADC, everything is working fine, so it's your issue. Simple as that. But you need to make them realize why it's their issue and not our issue. So always have your logs and traces ready and ready to show them, because they don't know anything about traces, how to check traces, how to do what. So they are going to rely totally on you on that. So have that as your proof ready to show them that it's your issue, not my issue. So the basic let me open up our article only.
That's what happening in my lab also. If I bypass gateway, it is working fine. If I give
And
direct storefront URL, it is working fine.
did you have a session with Ayush?
No, I still not.
Is he going to take any session? I don't think so. There's any use anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So let's talk about gateway ICA proxy. So how without gateway this works is, storefront acts as your front and is the first thing user accesses and communicates with to get your application's desktop enumerated. When I say enumerated, I mean when you log in and you can see icon on your screen, that's enumeration. When you click on your icon and open up an application, that's your launch. So storefront is the front for all the communication from client and to your backend. So first of all, let's talk about how it happens when we do not have gateway in picture. So user accesses the storefront URL. You get your application. So as soon as user accesses your storefront, storefront has your capability of authenticating the user. It has the configuration for authentication. And Ashwin, do you have your storefront handy right now?
No, but just a URL is working, but that apps, no, that
That's
server has been
fine.
installed.
Do you have your storefront server?
Yes.
Can you share it? Share your screen. So storefront has that capability of authenticating the user. It has the configuration where you can define how you want to authenticate the user through SAML, through simple AD, LDAP, things like that. So yeah, let me request for controls. This is your storefront. Okay, this is, we have configured 2 stores. This is the configuration that we have. And this is the manage your authentication method. This is where you define your authentication, how you want to authenticate your user. So we have username and password, that is your simple AD, your SAML authentication, your domain pass-through. So if you are connected through your Windows system and access storefront, if you are on the same domain, it goes through. If you have your smart card, you can configure that, things like that. So this is where your authentication you define. If you have gateway configured, you need to have pass-through from Netscaler gateway checked. But otherwise, storefront itself is also capable of handling authentication on its own. So user accesses, goes to your storefront, accesses the storefront, gets a login page, puts in username and password. Say we just have username and password configured, so they put username and password. Storefront communicates to your AD and authenticates the user, checks the credentials. If the credentials are correct, authenticates the users. It'll go ahead and check with delivery controller what applications are assigned to that particular user. And according to that, we'll give you apps icons on your screen for your apps and desktops. So we also have your delivery controller configuration here, where we edit, and this is where you configure. So because we have Zen apps and desktop 7.0 and higher, we are going to use, you can give whatever name. You need to give the IP of your server or load balancer if you're communicating with your delivery controller on HTTP or HTTPS, things like that. So because of this configuration, this is your storefront communicates to your delivery controller and gets the apps and desktops that are assigned to that user, displays them to you. When you click on an application, say there was a calculator application, I clicked on the calculator application and it launches. What happens then? So when I click on my calculator application, a request comes to the storefront that I'm looking to launch calculator. It goes to your delivery controller, checks if that calculator application is even available, that server where your application is published on which server, is that server available? Is it registered or is it unregistered? Because if it's unregistered, again, you won't be able to launch things. So if it's registered, it's not under maintenance mode, that means it's not down. If it's registered, it's there and it's available and you have your licenses. Another thing is you have your licenses. So per user license you have on your CBAT, and there is a license of using which you can actually give that user the calculator. Say everything is green. The server is up and running, it's registered, we have our license. Store will get that information from the delivery controller and it'll create an ICA file. In that ICA file, it'll tell, okay, this is the IP of the VDA server that I got from delivery controller. This is the port, with.
Aparna, shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, sure. On which you can access the, VDA server and all the other information that's needed for your workspace application to launch that application calculator. So it gives all that information, puts it in .ica file, sends it to the user. User downloads that ICA file, clicks on that ICA file, and using your workspace app, that ICA file opens up. As soon as that ICA file is read right from your workspace looks into that IP and communicates directly with that IP, that server where calculator is published on 1494 or 2598. We use two ports, 1494 and 2598 is used when you're using session reliability. Session reliability is what? If, say, at any time your session disconnects and it so would it be like your communication to that application terminates and then you'll have to launch that application again? Without session reliability, yes. With session reliability, and that configuration is on storefront, because storefront is telling the workspace, right, which port to use. So that is done on your storefront end. So with session reliability on port 2598, we if there is any disconnection and we have to, as soon as that connection is restored, the client connection to that application from where it left or where they left last time, it restores. You need not launch it again. So depending on what configuration you have on the storefront, it will either give you 1494 or 2598. So as soon as you launch your ICA application on Workspace, Workspace communicates with that IP directly and establishes a communication and ICA communication, and your calculator launches. This is how it works without gateway in picture. Now, the issue with this is, okay, you're authenticating, great. Why do you need gateway when you're authenticating? You need gateway because you cannot give that IP of your server where your calculator is published to anyone on internet. So right now I'm on internet, and the application that I'm using, maybe it's a Chrome application that I'm using. I'll share my screen in a while. I'm not showing anything particular right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, yeah. So for example, right now, if I access even Chrome through Workspace, Citrix cannot give me an IP that's internal to them and a server where that application Chrome is hosted, and it's internal to them over the internet. And even if they do give me that IP, I will not be able to access that IP directly on the internet. Like, it's there on their internal network, and I'm sitting here on internet, so I will have no communication to that IP. So that's why we need a gateway. Now let's see where the gateway fits into all this communication that I talked about. And try to keep this article handy, because not only happened there. Anyways, do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, just a moment. Okay. So first and foremost, yes, Citrix Gateway will act as a front instead of your storefront now, and all your communications from client goes through your Citrix Gateway. One is that. Your authentication is handled by Citrix Gateway, but lot other more things come into picture as well. So what would happen is, and you can go through this article, and I'll mention this article in the chat. Okay. So there are IPs. It's a very detailed workflow, and you have IPs of your VDA, storefront, etc., to make you better understand how it works. So first of all, TCP handshake happens with the Citrix gateway and client. After a successful TCP handshake, SSL handshake happens. After, this is how a SSL handshake looks like. A client hello is sent, server hello. After server hello, the server sends the certificate. A client key exchange is done, chain cipher spec is done, and client hello, the SSL handshake is successful. So under certificate, if you expand your header, you can see the certificate, the validity, the chain, if it's the ADC's gateway sending the whole chain or just the server certificate, things like that. So after that server certificate is sent by the gateway, your key exchange chain cipher spec, they are, they're both negotiating on the master key and the session key for the data encryption, and it starts encrypting the data. After a successful SSL handshake, first thing that happens is your authentication policy gets hit. So if you have a basic authentication policy configured in your gateway, that will get hit. If you do not have any basic authentication policy, the authentication profile gets hit. So as soon as SSL handshake ends, your authentication is hit. So in this scenario, in this article, they're using LDAP plus radius. So first of all, your client sends credentials. So, as soon as this as an handshake is done, you get a login page where you have your username, password, and in this case also passcode for your radius. So user sends the credentials. As soon as the credentials are sent, it will send username, password, and the passcode. First of all, we check the LDAP because first is your LDAP configuration. So it takes the username and password and communicates with the LDAP. So the credentials are sent under post request. So in the trace, you will see post/CGI/login request. If you click on this post request and collapse your HTTP header, you will actually see your credentials. So try not do that in front of the customers. They do get irritated sometimes that you're putting my password on display. Give them a fair warning that I'm taking a trace. All your traffic will be decrypted, but we are keeping it on a secure server, and as soon as we are done analyzing, it's not something that we're going to share your password or anything, or just show them in the encrypted format. If you follow the HTTP header, it will be there in the encrypted format, and I think that will be better. So just don't open up the post request totally fully in front of them until and unless it's a authentication issue that you are troubleshooting. Okay, but give them a fair warning before that. Anywho, so this post request has your credentials, and these credentials are sent to the ADC. As soon as the ADC gets those credentials, we initiate a communication with your LDAP server. So it's a 4-step process. First of all, it will start a bind request. It will send a bind request to the LDAP server to authorize gateway itself with the and LDAP server sends with a response. So in bind request, go back to LDAP.
What is it, Aparna? Appliance is running on Grace.
I'm taking the license from ADM. So
Okay.
the communication between the ADC and ADM. Actually, I was playing around with something. Ignore this. If you get any case where appliance is running in grace mode, tell me if we are going to move it to ADM team. And you're not going to handle it.
Okay.
Okay. So these credentials, the base DN credentials, the admin bind DN credentials that we give, that is used to authorize gateway itself. These credentials, the service credentials that you have, needs to have a read and write access to your LDAP. Okay. So that's your first bind request. Then comes your cert request. Now that we have authorized, gateway has authorized itself with the LDAP, it's going to look into the user. where does that user that is trying to authenticate lie? That particular search request is, LDAP responds to it by a search response entry where it gives you all the attribute value where all that particular user is. It contains all your users group information, what all group that user is in. As soon as the user we get, okay, we have located the user, which all group it belongs to. The next step would be to send a bind request. This third request that we have is for your credentials, your user password that we verify. And the response is either it's a success or it's not. Once we get that success from the LDAP, we send an unbind request. So the bind request that we send in initially with the credentials to outside the gateway, we are now unbinding ourselves because the authentication is done. So that's a successful LDAP authentication. If it's a reject, you'll get reject as well in the bind response to the your second bind request that you send with the password. Or if you are not able to find the users, you'll get it in the search response entry. So you can see this very clearly on port 389 because the 389 uses plain text. But if you have your 636, you will need certificate from the AD server to be able to decrypt it and look into it. So now that we are done with the LDAP authentication, there was second field passcode which sent the password for the radius. Now, as soon as the LDAP is successfully done, gateway sends the token to your, it's a simple access request to your radius, and the radius sends back with a response that says access accept or access reject, depending on whether the passcode was correct or not. And that is the end of your authentication. So that's how the authentication for your using this LDAP and radius look like. So as soon as ADC has checked against your AD and radius server and the credentials are correct, it responds a client with a 302 and another 200 OK. So there are two things. First is send a 302. The 302 will have a location that, okay, send the next GET request to CGI/set client question WICA. Now, as we saw in VPN, when we got that CGI/set client question agent, AGNT, that session policy is getting hit. Here also set client question WICA means the session policy is getting hit. And in the 200 OK to this that comes from the gateway, we get the response to redirect the URL to storefront. So in this 200 OK, if you open it up, you will see the URL here for /citrix/store name. And you will see in front of store name, there has to be a web always when you are accessing storefront through your browser. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, you'll get a 404 error. So in your session profile, when you mention your storefront URL, it has to be https/ or http/URL of your FQDN of your storefront, or IP of your storefront /citrix/ whatever store name you have given, and followed by web. Okay. So now, as soon as authentication is done, 302 is done, sends a GET request to set client WICA. That's to tell your gateway that it needs to hit the session policy. As soon as your session policy gets hit, it looks into published application, gets the store URL name, and forwards and sends back a 200 OK response that has that store name. So your login is complete. We have your store name, and ADC knows what storefront to connect to get your apps and desktop. Because in the end, when we did not have gateway in picture, we were talking to directly to storefront to get apps and desktop. Here, gateway is going to talk on behalf of the user to get apps and desktop. So user clicks login again in storefront page, a new login request is sent to storefront. So as soon as we get that 200 OK, you will see in your address bar the URL changes from HTTPS, say it was gateway.lab.com. It will change to /citrix/ if the name was store of my store on storefront, it'll look like something like this, and you will get a page which will tell you like whether you want to use Citrix Lite. That means you don't want to use your workspace app, or you want to use a workspace app, things like that. All that is pushed from your storefront on logging in. You click on that logon page that will use workspace default, and you are then redirected to your storefront. So you get your apps in desktop. So when you do that, when you click on that, log on to your storefront page, what happens on the back end is a login request is sent to storefront. And here we are not posting any requests. We are not posting any credentials. So because, as I said in your session profile, or the session profile, this single sign-on to web application, because we have this checked, user won't be authenticating again and again. So first it's authenticated to ADC, it does not have to authenticate to storefront. Because this is checked, your gateway interface on behalf of user and will send a post request with credentials. The first post request is an empty request. It doesn't have any credentials. It's just a way to tell the storefront that we are trying to access and your storefront. So storefront will respond with a 401 unauthorized. So we send a post request to gateway auth/login. It sends a 401 request because now storefront is looking for credentials. We have authentication enabled on storefront, and it's always going to be enabled on storefront. So it's looking for 401. If you open that 401, you'll see AG basic, Citrix AG basic, password required, yes. So because as I showed you in the storefront, there is an option to pass through from Citrix gateway. So it knows that the user is going to come for the store. It can come directly to store and it can come through gateway. And it is expecting that because of that configuration on the storefront where we have selected pass through from gateway. Now it is expecting Citrix AG basic is Citrix access gateway basic, password required is yes, logout URL is your AG basic / logout. So that's what it is requesting for from 401. As soon as this 401 comes to the ADC from storefront, that's a trigger for us to intervene on behalf of the user because we have single sign-on enabled on session policy. So ADC will send another post request. This post request will have your credentials. So it will have the following things. It will have a username, right? It will have your domain. It will have your password, and it will have your session ID. So username and password, it takes from when you entered username and password initially when authenticating to the gateway. But where did it get the domain from? It got the domain from your published application, your single sign-on domain. So make sure the domain configured here is the domain that storefront is expecting while doing a single sign-on. So it takes the domain from here, takes credentials from when user had entered it, and it creates its own session ID for that user, sends these 4 information to your storefront. As soon as your storefront gets this, it will take the username and password and contact your AD server with, using Kerberos protocol and authenticates the user. As soon as the user is authenticated, it will send a 200 OK to the your gateway to Citrix ADC, and this 200 OK will have this particular response. It will have an authentication status, which is a success, and authentication type that it did was a Citrix AD basic. That means that credentials came through your Citrix gateway.
So
and this is how your single sign-on is done. Yeah.
It will, I mean, storefront will authenticate with AD, or it will just send it to a delivery controller and delivery controller will check with the AD?
It will check. Storefront itself verifies it with the AD. It doesn't send it to delivery controller.
Okay.
Okay. So this whole process is your single sign-on to storefront. At any point after authenticating, your users get error, which is the most common error, is cannot complete your request. You will see an article with tens of reasons why you cannot complete your request. First and foremost thing you do is go to your event viewer on your storefront. Under your application and delivery, see Citrix delivery services, open that up and check for the error there. So Ashwin, can you quickly share your screen again? I need the storefront server.
Yeah. Could see the screen?
Yes. Thank you. Can you give me the controls? Okay. So okay, we have event viewer here. Let's open it up. Go to application and services logs. So even that error that you're getting, right, Ashwin, log on expired, you can see the reason here under Citrix delivery services.
Okay, here they told to change some false to true, but I tried it, it didn't work. But I didn't check any errors.
A request was sent to store that was detected as passing through gateway. However, no gateway are configured for this service. So the storefront realizes that there is a request coming through the gateway. This is the gateway, but it doesn't have any gateway configured there, so that's the issue. So as you can see here, very detailed error message will be given. So, but make sure when you get cannot complete your request, you will get one error with event ID. You can check event ID here, event ID 10, which will tell you it's a Citrix AG basic logon failed. That is a general error. It will tell you nothing apart from that the authentication was done through your gateway, and that authentication has failed. But we know that already, that a user was coming through gateway, logged into gateway, and then cannot complete your request. So look for the error next to it. It can be event ID 1, 7, 8, whatever. That will tell you the reason why actually your single sign-on failed. So always look into it. So right now, Ashwin is getting error. Your logon has expired. Please try again or contact your administrator or something like that. If you come here, this is the reason. There is a request was sent to the service store that was detected passing through a gateway. So it realizes that request from gateway is coming, but there is no gateway configured properly against which it can check the request that's coming in. Okay, so always check the event viewer. That will give you an idea where you need to start troubleshooting if single sign-on fails. If even you're having issue even with that, take a trace on the ADC and match it against this particular article, and you'll get some idea of where exactly in this process. Like if we are sending after 401 in the post request, if we are sending the credentials properly and we are getting a fail here, then check on the storefront. There was something like it could be that you are sending the username, domain, password right, but this domain and what the domain that storefront server is on is different. It was expecting some other domain, so it will give you an error related to your the domain realm is different, and it was expecting realm this, but the received domain was this. So something like that, and it will give you an idea of what needs to be changed where. If so, what happens if it's a multi-domain environment? There are not just single domain, but multi-domain environment. You don't configure, in that case, you don't configure any single sign-on domain here. Instead, you let your authentication handle the whole single sign-on process. So under LDAP, you'll see server logon name attribute. This is the name that we are expecting the user will enter on the logon page, and we are going to send to LDAP to search and authenticate. But you don't have to send this particular for a single sign-on. What you want to send to the single sign-on is handled by your SSO name attribute. So what single sign-on name attribute you want to send to the backend? If you don't configure anything, it's going to send your SAM account name, what you're getting from your user. Say in a multi-domain environment, I'm coming from domain 1. Ashwin is coming from domain 2. Maybe Clovis is coming from domain 3. And on your storefront server, you have, the domains are trusted amongst each other, and it's not looking for just one particular domain, and it trusts all the domain. In that case, click new, and here instead configure user principal name. So when you configure user principal name, it will fetch this user principal name attribute from the LDAP during authentication and pass on user principal instead of SAM account name to your storefront. Now, what's the difference between SAM account name and user principal name? In case you don't know, for example, for me, when I log in my network credentials, I use my username as Aparna.sh. That's my SAM account name, but my user principal name is aparna.sharma@citrix.com. So first name dot last name @yourdomain.com. So @domain.com, that's how we pass the domain to the storefront through user principal name, because it will have the domain in it, right? So that's how you handle your multi-domain environment. So that was about your single sign-on. Now, okay, now that we have done single sign-on, but still we haven't received any lists or apps and desktops from the storefront. We still haven't received anything. What happens once we have logged in properly into the storefront? We send a request to storefront that has citrix/store/web/resource/list. So we are asking for the resource list from your store. As soon as that request is forwarded to the storefront checks the availability with the delivery controller against that username. So at this point, storefront has that username. So it checks against the delivery controller that what all apps and desktops are, allotted to this particular user, and if they are available. If they are available, the list of all those apps and desktop goes to your storefront. storefront converts that response to JSON and sends that to gateway. Gateway forwards that response to client. And this is how that request looks like in 200. Okay. So it will have your icon URL, your ID, your launch launch status URL. So before launch, if you want to check, when you're going to check the status of the particular application, the URL the client is going to send for that, the URL that client is going to set for your launch, the name of the server that you're going to see displayed, and path position, other things, subscription URL, subscription status, and all. You are not much concerned about it. If you see that authentication is successful, but after authentication, single sign-on is also successful, but you see that no apps are desktop available or some errors, there are no apps or desktop, take a trace, look into it. And if the storefront is giving us a 200 OK, but there is nothing here, it will just give you like an array and nothing. Like it will have nothing. This 200 OK response has nothing in it. That means the delivery controller is not giving storefront a list, and it's not able to forward to us. So you don't even have to take a trace on the storefront to check that delivery controller is not giving us anything. If storefront is giving us an empty response, open up a case with the CVAT and show them that in the trace, you're getting an empty response from storefront for this particular request. Look into it. Why are you guys not giving us apps in desktop? And they'll look into it. Okay. So, all right. Now that we got list of our applications and desktop, and that is displayed, you want to launch an application. So as soon, again, you want to launch an application, click on the icon of that app on the desktop. So when you click on that app, you will see two URLs coming to the ADC. First is your resource/get launch status, and the other is resource/launch ICA. Here, for the first request, you're looking for if that application is even available to get launched. We get a 200 OK, great. Then send us the ICA file that we are going to use to actually open up that application. So this is the request. The resources/launch ICA is the request for your ICA file. Gateway forwards this request as it is to the storefront. Storefront gets the VDA information from delivery controller. As soon as storefront gets the VDA information that, say, again, I'm opening a calculator. Where is that calculator published? On which server that calculator is published? What's the IP of that server? If session reliability is on, what's the port 2598? If it's not on, what's the port 1494? Great. Storefront has that information. But as I said, you cannot give that IP across internet on public internet to your client. Client cannot access your internal resources. So an extra step here that storefront does is storefront server contacts the STA server instead and gets the STA ticket. So for this purpose, we'll configure our STA servers on gateway as well. So under your published application, you have STA server. You configure your STA servers. Say, okay, I'm accessing this on HTTPS. Okay. As soon as I configure this STA server, a request is sent to the STA server to get its auth ID. And if I'm able to communicate with it properly, the state will be up and I'll get an auth ID. ADC maintains the STA server to auth ID mapping. Okay. We configure this STA server here. We configure the same STA server on same protocol. So if whether it's HTTP or HTTPS, you configure it. If it's configured on HTTPS here, configure your STA server on storefront on HTTPS as well. So you configure your storefront server on STA server on storefront as well. And because you've configured it there, so Ashwin, again, share your screen.
Yeah. You need storefront server.
Yep. Okay, so this is my storefront controls. So let's take a step back and look into what all configuration do I need to do on the storefront. So if I want to enable and tell my storefront that the request, all your request is going to, the authentication request is also going to come through gateway, the access request is also going to the gateway, you need to configure your remote access settings, enable remote access settings, and allow users, check the gateway. And where we get this gateway, I'll talk to you about this in a minute. So check the gateway that you've configured and click on OK. So this tells the ADC, this tells the storefront that we have a gateway configured and request from gateway will be coming to the store. So as soon as you configure that, you'll see over here in the access that the access is internal as well as external. So this particular store one can be accessed through gateway as well as directly through storefront bypassing the gateway, whereas store one has internal network only. This cannot be accessed through gateway. So go to your manage NetScaler gateways, and this is where you configure your gateway. So give it a name, whatever name you want, the URL of the gateway, then your secure ticket authority. This is where you configure STA. You configure STA here exactly how you've configured on your ADC. So if you click on add, all you need to give is your https/fqdn. That's it. The slash script slash ctxsta.dll. This is the whole request that goes to the STA when we want the information from the STA. And this is the request you will see if you take a trace on the ADC that goes to the STA again. So you just need to configure your IP or FQDN here. Make sure the same STA servers are configured on storefront and ADC. It cannot be like you're configuring 3 STA servers on storefront, but only 1 on gateway. That's going to have an issue. So if you configure 3 STA on storefront, configure 3 STA servers on gateway as well. Okay. This is where you mention session reliability, that you are enabling session reliability or not. If you want your storefront to load balance your STA servers, this is where you enable it. Then we have your authentication settings. You need not worry about it. So let's remove this for now. You don't need callback URL until and unless you're using SAML or Smart Access, which we are not going to talk about right now. So make sure STA is configured here properly. Okay. So this is from where. Okay. So that configuration is from where your storefront gets that STA server, information, and it contacts the STA server information to get the STA ticket. So we get the STA ticket, and then we configure, a storefront generates your ICA file and sends that to the gateway. Now let's look into the request in your Wireshark. We get the launched ICA request for the ICA file. We forward that to the storefront. Now storefront gets the VDA information from the DDC. So this is how it looked like, the IPs, your address, your port that it's going to communicate it with, and infos, etc. of your VDA. Now, as soon as we get that information, like this is my IP and this is 1494, This is the information for your VDA. We are getting it from your DDC, delivery controller. Storefront contacts the STA server to get the STA ticket information. Why do we need this STA ticket information? We need this STA ticket information to mask the IP and port so that we are not sending the IP and port to the client as it is. What Storefront does is, Storefront sends the request to your STA. It's a post request. It consists of your IP of your VDA and the port, so that STA server can keep that information with it, that okay, for this particular user with this particular session ID, I'm giving, we have to give this IP on this port. So this user with this session ID is going to communicate with this VDA on this port. STA keeps that information with it, creates a ticket, a STA ticket, and in response, it gives it the authority ID, the STA ID, that is the ID of the server. So, we are able to distinguish which server it is, and gives the ticket. This ticket is mapped against the session ID, username, the IP of the VDA, and 1494, the port that we give in the request. When Storefront gets this information, that is your STA ID, authority ID, as well as your STA ticket, it takes that, generates an ICA file. This is what an ICA file looks like. So in the ICA file, through gateway, with respect to gateway, we need to look into that. When we are getting the ICA file, are we getting the STA ID, the auth ID? Yes, we are. Are we getting a ticket, STA ticket? Great, we are. Second thing you need to look into is SSL proxy host. This SSL proxy host is the URL of your gateway. Why we need it, we'll talk about it in a second. So this ICA file, it'll give it to the gateway. Gateway will send a 200 OK response that contains this X ICA file and gives it to the user. Now, as soon as the user gets this information, gets the ICA file, they click on the ICA file, and as I said, ICA file can only be opened on Workspace app. So on my client machine, Workspace app opens up this ICA file. It looks into this SSL proxy host URL. Then that's how your Workspace knows that it needs to communicate with this gateway, because it's going to be a totally new communication from your Workspace. All the TCPs, this was a whole one TCP session till your launch. From the browser, it ends here, and a new connection is started from your Workspace. So you will see a separate TCP handshake with your gateway, a client hello, server hello, and proper SSL handshake again with your Workspace. If you have DTLS enabled, you will see DTLS, client hello on DTLS instead of TLS. Okay, so a whole new handshake happens, and first of all, your Workspace sends an application data. This application data consists of ICA data. So if you can see here, as soon as you launch that application, client sends an ICA data. What is that ICA data? That ICA data has your session ID of the user, your STA information, the STA ID, and your ticket, STA ticket. As soon as the gateway gets that ICA data, it will, because we have configured on our gateway, this is the IP or the FQDN of the STA server, and this is the authority ID. As soon as we are able to communicate to the STA, we get that auth ID or the STA ID, and we have mapped it against a server. And once we get that ICA data that has the STA ID, we know which server to communicate to. So we send a request to that STA server, and in that we send that ticket we got. So the ticket we got in our ICA file. We'll send that ticket to STA server. Once the STA server gets that ticket, it will respond back with the VDA server's IP and port to our ADC. Because it had mapped it against the ticket, STA ticket, it had mapped that VDA IP and port when storefront was communicating with the STA. So now the STA server responds back with your VDA IP and the port. As soon as ADC gets this IP and port, ADC will start a communication on TCP on 1494. And the communication on your backend with your VDA is established. And anyways, Workspace has already established a communication on the front end. And now there is a proper communication for your client, ADC, and VDA, and your application launches, and you're able to use your application. At this point, Gateway acts as nothing but a proxy. So it's taking the request from client, sending it to VDA, taking the response from VDA, sending it to client, nothing else. Okay? So when an issue comes with a launch, that you're clicking on an icon or a desktop and you're not able to launch something, this is what you would look into. You look into, you take a trace on ADC, you look, did I get, did the ADC get from client this launch ICA request? I did. Was it forwarded to storefront? We did forward it to storefront. Did storefront give us an ICA file? It did not. Issue with the storefront. If it did give us an ICA file, open up that ICA file, look into it and check, did it give STA ticket and STA ID properly, and was SSL proxy host configured properly? It has happened that it might not give you this STA ID and ticket. Instead, it will give you the IP address and port. That means STA is not properly configured, involves CVAD. Ask them to look into the STA server. If the ICA file is properly given, check, is there a communication issue between Workspace and ADC? Is SSL handshake going through properly? Is TCP handshake going through properly? There's no issue there. If the SSL handshake is successful, then check, did the STA communication happen? Was the STA properly configured? If the STA was properly configured, did it give us a proper IP? Sometimes it might not give you an IP, instead it will give you just an FQDN, and there is no DNS configured on the ADC, it will not be able to resolve that FQDN. Configure a DNS on this particular ADC and get this resolved. If we got an IP and we got the port, maybe ADC is not able to communicate with the VDA, and that's where it's failing. We are sending send, not getting any SYNAC from backend, not able to launch any application. So that's a network issue on client. So that's how you tell whether an issue is from the ADC, the components that is handled by ADC, if it's an issue by the ADC or it's an issue with the CVAD end. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. So I have pinged you guys over chat this article. Go through it. If you have any queries, any questions, let me know. There is a part here which talks about smart access. I've left it for now. So leave it, you guys leave it for now. Don't go through it. Just try to understand the communication process without smart access. So under your get the apps desktop list 2.3, send, when you send a request, when the storefront talks to the VDA, we have a talk about a callback message to gateway. Leave that for now. Leave that smart access gateway part for now. Just know that the storefront communicates to the delivery controller gives the list. That's it. Let's not get into smart access for now.
Aparna, I wanted to ask you something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when we take the NS trace, so over the ADC, first we start the NS trace and then we log on to the gateway for
Yes.
storefront.
Mm-hmm.
Or so first we have to start the NS trace and then only we access it, then only it will be captured. Is that the
Yep.
way?
So you
Okay.
have to
And
first start the trace only, then it will be captured, right? It ADC doesn't run trace or captures packet otherwise by
okay.
default.
Also, the thing I also wanted to request you, is there any suggestion of how to, or Ashwin, can you tell me how you configured storefront so that we can
Mm,
also test it out in our labs?
I created around 7, 8 servers, destroyed. Again, I rebuilt it. It was long process, Abba. Tomorrow I'll tell you.
All right, awesome. Thanks.
I think there's a lab, there's a CVAD lab
Yeah.
also.
Yes, same guide.
Yeah.
So upon it, is there any like troubleshooting flow chart that could summarize that we could maybe look at in case any issue?
Uh, so no.
Okay.
If
So you that maybe
uh,
build that yourself.
yeah, so if you understand the flow of how it works,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be able to look into like if the authentication is failing, it's going to be one of these components only, right? So check one by one. Start from step one, if that went through, step two, if that went through, things like that. And with
Okay.
time, you'll get hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just understand the flow, I would
Yeah,
say,
okay. Yeah.
and go with it. Yeah.
So upon the station ID will not have the IP address, right? Which will be compromised. It will be only with the STA server, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like uh, what is like so this will be like lot of resource or network utilization, right? So like what is the main difference between like VPN and this ICA? Because users can directly access through VPN also, right? Or
That's
CVAD will be
on
only.
customer requirement. They will never come to you when asking, why should I get ICA proxy when I can get a VPN? This is all on customer requirement. And frankly speaking, most customers use ICA proxy than VPN, actually, in reality, and just give access to certain desktops and apps through ICA proxy.
Okay. So deployment cases will not get right.
Yeah, we do not handle deployment cases, full stop. We don't
Okay.
give any suggestion to anybody for regarding what is preferred, what not. We have Citrix consultancy services for that. They can reach out to them
Okay. Like any topology changes also will be taken by sales team.
by the consultants. Yeah, so
Okay.
they won't come to you if they've already made the change and they've already configured something. They might explain you their topology, they might explain you their requirement, but they would have done the basic configuration themselves, or by hiring a consultancy services, they would have done that. And then it's not working. That's why they'll come to you that it's not working.
Okay. Okay. So this callback request URL only comes when that smart access, right? So
Yes,
that pre all.
smart action SAML.
Okay.
Ashwin, I'll take SAML on Monday now.
Yeah.
I've been speaking since 9:30 p.m. IST. That is 11 a.m. EST, and I've been speaking for five. I don't know how many hours. Not even 6 hours. But
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Aparna, for all this valuable
oh,
information.
as far as you guys can understand, and that's all that's needed.
Yeah. I think I can enjoy this weekend, but not.
Yeah, starting days are hard. Then you'll get used to it.
Yeah, these 2 days also I didn't study because I was not feeling well
Uh-huh.
because of this typhoid. So it comes and
Okay.
goes.
How's
If
your
you
wife doing now?
now she's good, and
Yeah.
like if you're going to have like more like chilled food or like
Uh-huh.
more spicy food, it will
Uh-huh.
come back.
So this is how your HA communication looks like. I just had this handy. I'll just show you. Like on 3003 port between two ADCs. So this is how you check your HA communication on trace. I'm not even sure what trace this is for.
And Apana, one thing I observed, like when I was doing this storefront, right? When
Hmm.
I'm using this green bubble and all, so I'm not able to
Hmm.
log in. When I'm using this default page, I can
Hmm.
log in. So is there like any known issues like that?
Nope.
That's because strange. When I'm going to use this green bubble theme, I'm not getting the redirect URL is weak VPN. It is getting like some log on to slash log on like that. When I'm using this dark theme black, I'm getting like a URL as VPN on the top.
Okay,
And
we'll check it on Monday. I will see what's
sure, sure.
happening and I will tell you.
And one last question regarding this AAA. So as you told on that day, I just created a AAA with that IP, and I am able to see that 302 redirect is going on.
Hmm.
And but the server, right? That's a just blue green server, and given by the lab stage people. It says that 401, sorry 403. I'm
That's
not able
on
to get
the
4 bit.
back end, right? If it's not going to have a particular access or whatever they've configured on the server,
No, same
it's not the
token.
best. Maybe it's looking for a Kerberos or NTLM challenge, and we don't
Mm,
have any single sign-on configured, so that's going to be an issue. So that's the thing. If you use an external server which we haven't configured totally, there's only so much you can test with it. And if a request is as far as like 403 or 401, whatever you get, you're getting it from the back end.
mm.
ADC is working as it's supposed to. It's not us doing anything. And that's all, even in customer scenario, that's all you'll have to show them that it's your
Sure.
backend doing.
Okay, those things are working fine then. And on the video recording, you told like 3022. So I was
Mhm.
searching what is a 3022 error. Then I listened carefully. You're telling 3022 client.
Huh.
Even I checked with Abba also. She told I don't know what is 3022. Then I turned on this caption. Then I was I
Right.
missed that redirect part.
Okay.
Thanks,
All
Apana.
right. No issues. Okay, guys. So you can go back. I think it's almost close 5 p.m. for you.
I think he dropped. No, no, okay.
Oh,
Oh, he's there.
oh, he's there.
Yeah. No, some okay. My screen is too much zoomed.
No, he's there. It was a long session, I know, but hope it wasn't that boring that you have to just drop in between. Not able to hear you, Clovis.
He has actually a mic issue, I guess.
Uh,
I was able to understand like somewhat because I configured like 4 or 5 times the storefront server. I'll not sure this weekend I'll be able to check because
that's fine. Take yours on time. That's
I
totally
have
fine.
some function
Ap-
to attend.
Aparna, is this our last session or the training goes on for next week? Because like if I have to join on Monday for the
Oh,
EMEA,
that's
then
the last session for me.
I will
They
be
Yeah.
got
feeling
me.
hell.
Uh,
So this
they
is
have
the
me
last
shadowing next week.
session.